since like second grade, you know what I'm saying? So it ain't like something that we all cruise and we got together because we all rap with us, so we like each other. That ain't how we met. We met because we was in second grade playing Atari 2600 or something, you know what I'm saying? Wow. That's how we all hooked up, or computers or something, you know what I'm saying? We was all into comic books or whatever, or just kicking it.
Nerds have existed in hip-hop since the very beginning. From rap lyrics with video game references to songs about being bullied for not being cool enough. Nerdy themes can be found in hip-hop culture as far back as the 80s. But then you have Nerdcore, a subgenre of hip-hop specifically created to make songs about nerdy topics. But you see, a lot of time has passed since the term Nerdcore was first created, and as time has passed, the subgenre, or I guess you can say the subculture, has gone through several generations that has made its history a lot more complicated and has now led us to what I'm calling the final era of nerdcore hip hop. So I want to explain how we eventually got here, but in order to do that, I think it's important that I first lay out hip-hop's relationship with nerd culture before the term nerdcore was even created. And I'm gonna call this era Wave Zero, the lost generation. So, as we've established, nerds have existed in hip-hop from the beginning. However, there are a few things to keep in mind when it comes to discussing the Wave Zero generation specifically. The nerdy things they were into back then were slightly different from what's at the forefront of the subculture today. Kung fu films and comic books were what took center stage. Let me try to paint the picture of this generation more clearly. As far as comic books and hip-hop is concerned, you can find a good amount of rappers that have named themselves after comic book characters. Former rap legend Jean Grey named themselves after the X-Men superheroine Phoenix, whose real name was Jean Grey. David Banner named himself after the Hulk, who also went by the name David Bruce Banner in the Incredible Hulk TV show. And then of course we have the man, the myth, the legend, MF Doom, who wore a mask inspired by Dr. Doom, the supervillain of the Fantastic Four comics. MF Doom's entire artistic identity would use this supervillain theme in various ways, including audio samples from the Fantastic Four cartoon, comic book inspired music videos. He even created entire alternate artist aliases that served as characters for his own stories.
The idea of having different characters to, different characters, really just to get the storyline across, coming from one particular character all the time makes, to me, the story boring.
Now, rappers being inspired by comic books should come as no surprise. Comic books are just a generally popular medium across the board, but then there's this other element I mentioned in regards to this Wave Zero generation. Martial arts films.
I was a dreamer. Reading comic books, drawing all the time, going to martial arts. My brother was looking at girls at 15, 16, Don't waste time with that stuff. Let's go to the dojo.
Martial arts films had a major impact on the Black community, and I think that in order to get the full picture of how these early generations of hip-hop and nerd culture intersected, it's important to understand how martial arts films fit into the equation. Around the 1960s and early 1970s, martial arts films started to make a big splash in America. These films would often be played in theaters located in various Chinatowns in American cities in order to target Asian American audiences. However, the budgets for these films were actually very cheap, so the ticket prices naturally were also very cheap. Add on to the fact that these Chinatown theaters were located closer to more urban locations, and you end up attracting a lot of lower income Black audiences to watch these movies.
And we would actually drive to New York City, to Chinatown, and they had 5 theaters, the Canal, the Sun Sing, and they all showed double features on the weekend. And we would sit in the theater and watch 2 movies, and we'd run through Chinatown and catch 2 more. And we'd watch 8 to 10 movies, and in the wee hours of the night, we'd drive back to DC, and we would train in whatever we saw on the screen. Kung Fu movies were shown just at the theaters in Chinatown, but they weren't on TV and nobody had ever seen them. And it was a very small group of folks that were really into that.
And I want to make sure to emphasize how much impact this had on the black community and hip hop. Moses Powell introduced martial arts to the very influential black religious organization, the Nation of Islam, making it a central part of their culture. His impact was so significant that he ended up being the first martial artist that the United Nations invited to do a live demonstration. And then you have Lupe Fiasco, another very important MC that we'll discuss later in the video, and spent his whole life studying martial arts. And remember when I mentioned Jean Grey's X-Men inspired name earlier? Well, Jean Grey also used to produce beats under her alternate name, Run Run Shaw. And this alternate name was a reference to the Chinese movie mogul Run Run Shaw, the owner of Shaw Brothers Studio, which was the main company that will release martial arts films in the States. And on top of all that, in previous videos, I've already discussed how early hip-hop breakdancers would sometimes study martial arts films for their dance moves. But in order to tie all of this together, we have to talk about the iconic rap group that truly represents all of the things I've discussed so far in terms of how hip-hop intersected with nerd culture during the 90s in particular. Let's talk about the Wu-Tang Clan. The Wu-Tang Clan is one of the most important rap groups of all time, and their entire musical identity combined gritty New York hip-hop sensibilities with kung fu film aesthetics and Nation of Islam 5%er philosophy.
We used to go to the Deuce and watch all the flicks, all the kung fu flicks all night.
We studied the discipline of like in the karate flicks or whatever, because they all was dealing with loyalty, love and trust, honor, brotherhood, you know, so that's the only thing.
The members of the Wu-Tang Clan encapsulate everything about the Wave Zero generation. Method Man's alternate alias was Johnny Blaze, based on Ghost Rider from the Marvel comics. Ghostface released his 1996 single Daytona 500 with a music video made entirely with clips from Speed Racer, making it one of the earliest music videos to use anime in this way. RZA would also later go on to compose the soundtrack for the Afro Samurai anime. And then of course we have the Wu-Tang video game that released on the PS1 with its own custom controller and everything. And even with all that said, I'm not totally sure if Wu-Tang would collectively identify themselves as a part of the broader nerd culture at the time, because of how seamlessly they incorporated a lot of these influences. And that's the thing. Wave Zero is oftentimes left out of these conversations about how hip-hop and nerd culture intersect, because this was very much still an era where maintaining a cool persona was still very important. Any nerdy lyrical references or aesthetics were mostly used by this generation as a way to add texture to their coolness, not to reject it. And this will be a very important thing to keep in mind as the video progresses. But for now, let's talk about Wave 1, the birth of the term Nerdcore.
Hey, this is MC Frontalot, final boss of Nerdcore Hip Hop. I am here on G4 on Freestyle 101. I'm going to go into that booth. I am going to do my best not to embarrass myself and those who love me.
The term Nerdcore was created by MC Frontalot on the song Nerdcore Hip Hop in the year 2000. It established a more, air quotes, official umbrella genre for rap songs that were talking about nerdy topics like video games, comics, and anime in a more direct, literal, overt way. Think more on the nose and less subtle, basically. Now, MC Frontalot and the birth of Nerdcore as an official genre has been discussed at length already in videos and documentaries like Nerdcore Rising, so you don't need me to retell this history for the 100th time. However, even though Frontalot is known as the artist who started this more overtly nerdy subgenre of rap, There's an artist that I think doesn't get discussed enough as the true link between the Wave 0 and Wave 1 generations of nerd culture in hip-hop.
This ain't paying me to say shit or nothing, but get you your Dreamcast if you play video games. Otherwise, you puzzle.
How many of y'all in here
right now?
How many of y'all actually in here play video games?
Video games, I got video to play before my life expires. Feel my desire.
This is Del the Funky Homo Sapien, a Bay Area rap legend, performing his song Proto Culture at the Sega Dreamcast launch party. This song was very unapologetically about his love for video games, with mentions of RPGs, Mega Man Legends, Nintendo Power, and a bunch more. It is not subtle. It isn't low-key about its references. The entire song is very overtly about his participation in video games as a hobby. This was an actual, true nerdcore song, and if you didn't already notice from the date on the footage, this was recorded in 1999, meaning this was performed and recorded before MC Frontalot created the term nerdcore in 2000. You see, Del the Funky Homo Sapien is one of the most interesting artists to think about when it comes to nerdcore. Not only does he have songs like Proto Culture, but he also made an entire concept album called Deltron 3030 about a fictional sci-fi universe with space battles, aliens, and futuristic technology. And to top it all off, he even collaborated with the legendary animated band, the Gorillaz, on their debut single, Clint Eastwood. Basically, it can be argued that Del the Funky Homo Sapien was the first prominent Wave 1 nerdcore rapper, but here's the thing. Del also has had many songs that weren't about nerd culture. It was not his entire artistic identity. This is why I say he exists as a link between the Wave 1 and Wave 0 generations. There was also an undertone of white identity in the early days of Wave 1 that can't be ignored and has been pointed out by some critics already.
I think a lot of the nerdcore stuff is novelty. It's like, oh, we're nerdy white kids who like Snoop Dogg and are being ironic with that juxtaposition of cultures. And that's like funny for 30 seconds, you know what I mean? But it's not doesn't really have anything to say about the world or art or, you know what I mean? Delete.
So, nerdcore wasn't just a subgenre per se. It's better to look at it as a subculture, and if you didn't intentionally align yourself with that community, or you didn't make that a central part of how you presented yourself to your audience, then you weren't labeled nerdcore for the most part. And to drive this point home, let's go on a little side quest and talk about Wave 1.5, the found generation. The Wave 1.5 era of nerd culture in hip-hop is defined by mainstream and mainstream adjacent rappers using more overtly nerdy aesthetics similar to Wave 1, while also still making music about other topics. I call this era Wave 1.5 because it was happening at the same time as Wave 1, but it was once again still not labeled nerdcore by most people. I also call this the found generation because it shares DNA with Wave 0, the lost generation, in many ways. It's basically a more openly nerdy version of Wave 0. It includes rappers like Lupe Fiasco, who had mixtapes like Revenge of the Nerds, with lyrics that referenced everything from Final Fantasy to Street Fighter. He even had a Nintendo DS on the cover of his debut album, Food and Liquor. His relationship with martial arts also once again shows the long history of how martial arts and nerd identity often intersect in the black community. Wave 1.5 doesn't just stop at Lupe, by the way. You have Charles Hamilton, who based his entire aesthetic off of Sonic the Hedgehog, and other blog era rappers like XV, who referenced video games and comics a lot as well. These artists were active throughout the 2000s and early 2010s when nerd nerdcore as an official term first became relevant, but they were not formally considered a part of nerdcore hip-hop as a subculture. And looking at it analytically, I do think it's because of their proximity to the mainstream and the fact that they had a wider range of subject matter. There was also a coolness to Wave 1.5 that didn't resonate with the MC Frontalot created flavor of nerdcore, similar to the cool factor we see in artists from Wave 0. And this is why I believe this natural divide existed. Eventually though, there would be another crop of hip-hop artists that would help further bridge this gap between the cool and uncool sides of nerd culture.
I wonder what you gon' look like next. Baby, your cosplay. Look at your outfit. It must have took you all day. And yo, you're beautiful, even though.
This song is called Cosplay Girl, released in 2010 by Joan. It went viral when it released and was actually the first hip-hop song to talk about cosplay in this way. Yes, the first. There were some songs that came later and were bigger, but this was the first one. And oh yeah, if you're new here or you haven't guessed it already, the person who made this song is actually me. You see, when this song first came out, it was everywhere by 2010 standards at least. Thousands of views, covered by big name gaming sites, but I did not make that song with the goal of becoming a part of the nerdcore genre. For me, it was just one of many topics that I wanted to make a song out of. I saw myself as an artist with range and didn't want to be boxed in. And then I also noticed that some of the people who were fans of that song would say things like,
I don't care for hip hop, but I love this because of the references.
And to be quite honest, I didn't want that to be my main audience. So to avoid this, I pivoted and intentionally did not make a lot of songs that overtly referenced nerdy topics.
I'ma drink this old soda even if it tastes. She chilling on the couch on her phone leg. I'm playing Blaze Blue, it's 2D, that means I'ma keep on rocking.
I knew that I was missing out on an entire audience that I could have capitalized on, and that was okay, but I now existed in this weird in-between space where I was known as a nerdy artist that was adjacent to the nerdcore space, but still had air quotes, cool sensibilities. It's hard to say how my trajectory would have changed if I had capitalized on the opportunity to be a full-blown nerdcore rapper, but there are other artists who were active around this time that actually did lean into nerdcore, and their stories played out very differently from mine. Let's talk about Wave 2, the second coming. Wave 2 is probably one of the more difficult eras to pin down because it was happening alongside Wave 1 and Wave 1.5, and it intersects with those waves in a lot of ways. But the way I like to describe it is that this crop of artists were the second generation of rappers to intentionally use nerdy themes in a more overt way. They were mostly black. There was a major emphasis on video game centric themes specifically, and they were willing to engage with the I don't care for hip hop, but I love the references audience, but to varying degrees. And one of the biggest examples of this is one of the most quintessential artists of the Wave 2 generation, Mega Ran. Thank you for sitting down with me, man.
I appreciate it.
First of all, just let everybody know who you are, man.
I'm Mega Ran, and teacher, rapper, hero, podcaster, creator.
In 2007, Mega Ran released an album called Mega Ran, which was themed around the Mega Man franchise, and this album got him a lot of recognition in nerd spaces.
Initially, I started working on this album in, I guess, sometime in 2006, and then as I was finishing it, I realized that it was close to the anniversary of Mega Man. Mega Man began in 87, and so 07 was the 20th anniversary. So I was like, oh, well, let me, try to finish this up and get it out by the anniversary date. And And I feel like it started moving a little bit. I put out a free version. See, back then you would put your music on like a, illegal downloading site or something. You would kind of leak it yourself. It started picking up some traction, going on some blogs and things, and then it got reviewed by IGN, and immediately, almost after the IGN review, I get a message on my socials from Capcom. Heard you're doing this Mega Man project, and I'm like, oh boy, like, yeah, because I love Mega Man, and this is just a dedication project, and blah blah blah, just a fan thing I'm doing, and they were like, oh man, well don't worry, like it's not like we're gonna shut you down or anything like that. Like we actually think it's kind of cool.
Capcom was so impressed that they collaborated with him around the release of Mega Man 9 in 2009, giving him full permission to sample their songs for the release of a new Mega Man themed mixtape, Mega Ran 9. But it doesn't stop there.
And next thing you know, Capcom emails me back and they're like, yeah man, we love what he does, so we're happy to give you a free exclusive worldwide license to utilize our our tunes and things, and I'm like, wow. And I was like, is this like the first time this has happened? And they were like, yes, this is kind of the first time this has happened.
And the success stories of Wave 2 don't just stop at Mega Ran. You also have artists like Samus. Samus released her Metroid-themed album Mother Brain in 2012 and garnered attention from the Nerdcore community and even Mega Ran himself. But after the release of this album, she talked about her struggles with being pigeonholed by the term Nerdcore.
I would see the ways that blogs or other things would talk about my music. Here's up-and-coming nerdcore rapper Samus. I didn't like that label was just put there. I felt like it pigeonholed me and it glossed over the way that I talk about broader social issues. But at the same time, I would never be foolish or naive enough to believe that it hasn't been instrumental in my success. When I go on tour,
navigating this newly created nerdcore subculture while still wanting to be a well-rounded artist is a consistent through line that I've noticed among the Wave 2 generation.
Yeah, so I don't label my own music nerdcore per se, but I could see how people would, some people would say that I was one of the pioneers of the genre because of the nature of the songs that I was writing at the time, at least the songs that I was releasing online.
Ladies and gentlemen, sailing straight on the beat. I go by the name of Balrog. Yeah.
Turbo T Double released his viral song Gigaton Punch in 2007, a song where he rapped from the perspective of Balrog from Street Fighter. Like, what was going on, like, after you put that song out? Like, how did it blow up the way it did?
Members of the fighting game community gravitated towards it, and so they started sharing it on different websites, different blogs. I remember it was on this site called Otaku at one point. In 2007, I believe, or 2008, I performed at Evo. And at the time, Evo was in Las Vegas at the Flamingo Hotel.
Gigaton Punch was also featured on the Street Fighter 25th Anniversary Collection. And Turbo also gained recognition from the likes of Lupe Fiasco himself.
Or his fans had a blog called LUPN blog, and they would regularly post some of my music videos. So I think the moderator's name was Megan, if I remember correctly. And yeah, they would post my music on there. So I think that's how Lupe first heard about me, I'm pretty sure.
Interesting. I remember. While all of this was going on, there was an important cultural shift that was happening towards the end of this era. Anime was getting bigger. It's not like anime wasn't already a big deal before this time, by the way, but the growth was accelerating for a number of reasons. Streaming was making it easier to access, social media was making it spread quicker, and a new generation of nerds were destigmatizing it. I don't want to turn this into a conversation about who to credit for anime's growth and popularity around this time, though. It's a very nuanced and complex topic all on its own. The important thing to note is that anime becoming cool will become a key factor when it comes to defining this next generation of nerdcore rappers. let's talk about Wave 3, Otaku Rap. Some of the eras that we've discussed so far have all had certain nerdy themes or hobbies that reflected where nerd culture was at the time. With Wave 0, it was kung fu films and comic books, for example. With Wave 2, it was video games. For Wave 3, it's anime. And this makes sense. Anime was always there, even during previous generations, but the sharp rise in popularity during the mid-2010s, combined with the continued destigmatization of nerd culture, created a perfect storm for Wave 3. This era of nerdcore rappers was defined by weeb aesthetics, anime references in their lyrics, and presenting a more overtly cool, confident persona.
Usually when you think of nerdcore, you think of like the kind of nerdy, kind of like a lot of times a white guy doing it as like a novelty, like to poke fun, like, this is all like a parody joke, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like we started kind of like the era of like, yo, no, we just like nerdy stuff, and we kind of fly with it too, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Shiki himself has amassed millions of streams across the internet with his own brand of lewd otaku-themed rap. Last time I saw you was when you Anime Expo.
Anime Expo,
yeah. When
we
you
had
came.
stayed at your crib like right before I flew out, yeah.
yeah. Nah, that. Shiki made a major impact on the Wave 3 generation, but he also gives a lot of credit to past generations as well.
No, I know Turbo.
Yeah.
Bro, that's crazy. I'm gonna tell you some other lore. That's crazy. You know how he was like that TSST, you know how you be saying that? That's why I made TMNS.
Word.
That gave me influence to do TMNS. That's crazy.
Wow. Shiki went on to mention several other artists, including artists like Richie Branson, who also played a big role in pioneering this Wave 3 style.
There's the pre-Richie Branson era, and there's the post-Richie Branson era.
Money on my mind, mind on Gundam. These other MCs now, I don't think they want it.
Now, if you're familiar, Richie Branson is a nerdcore hip-hop artist that maybe started in maybe the 2010s, making hip-hop music with a nerdier edge, inspired by anime, video games, comic books, but also bringing a level of, I think, cool and swag that wasn't necessarily there before that. Prior to that, I'm gonna just be honest, it was white dudes. And, you know, I feel like
But this was just the underground. There was also another wave of rappers coming in around this time in the mainstream also. Let's talk about Wave 3.5, the final era of nerdcore hip-hop. Throughout the 2010s, nerd culture was very much becoming normalized, and this was very apparent when looking at how it integrated into mainstream hip-hop and mainstream black culture as a whole around this time. Lil Uzi Vert released songs like Super Saiyan in 2015, Meg Thee Stallion cosplayed as Todoroki from My Hero Academia for Paper Magazine in 2019, and would later go on to release songs like Otaku Hot Girl. And speaking more broadly about black nerd culture, the well-known content collective RDC World will go on to start DreamCon, which has now blown up to be one of the largest modern anime conventions in America, while also serving as a space for black people with nerdy interests. They've even had Meg Thee Stallion herself attending as a special guest. So, where does that leave us? Why is this the final stage of nerdcore rap? Well, let me explain. Nerdcore rap as a genre started off as a subculture, separate from the broader culture of hip-hop. A big part of what made it work was the shared understanding that nerds were outsiders. But now we have mainstream rappers using more overtly nerdy themes and self-identifying as nerds. There is less of a stigma around the label now, and when you have less of a stigma around the label, the novelty of nerdcore becomes, well, less novel. It's harder to talk about how niche and quirky your love for anime and video games is when loving those things is more normalized.
That I get to experience is like getting into like a new anime. I'm about to dive into Evangelions. I do Evangelions.
And even beyond just the novelty factor, a lot of the nerdcore artists that I knew during the 2010s have all expanded their horizons beyond just nerdcore.
I feel like this movie is gonna be something that's gonna change. It's gonna be a successful movie, and I know this because the topics and the stories that we're telling in this film have not really been touched on in this way, like in a truly authentic way.
Is it children's music?
Yes. They call it children's family music.
Family music?
Kindie music, I've heard, because kids music that's indie.
You got Grammy nominated. Congratulations on that, by the way, man. Like,
thank you. Appreciate it.
That's really
wild to think about it.
That's
pretty crazy.
And even with all that said, it doesn't mean that we won't continue to see new rappers that label their music as nerdcore. In other words, this final era should not be seen as a decline. It's better to look at it as a peak or a leveling out, basically. Hip-hop and nerd culture intersected in a more subtle, nuanced way during the Wave Zero generation. And in a way, we've kind of returned to those roots. You can be cool, you can be uncool, you can make songs about a variety of things, you can be a little bit nerdy, you can be overtly nerdy, all without being limited to the subculture of nerdcore, because at this point, all of that stuff is bigger than just a subculture of hip-hop. It is the culture. It's just hip-hop. Comment if you have thoughts. Support if you like, and subscribe to support. It's GK. Peace out.
I think after that, we started seeing artists kind of embracing both, like your nerdiness as well as the cool factor. Yeah. And so now, I think that for better or for worse, nerdcore hip hop, you can't tell the difference between a lot of mainstream hip hop.
She's determined to belong, got her mind made up. Love that character and where you got your cosplays from. Got some big time fantasies, but small town raised.